All right. So, hi everyone. My name is Tsai. I am an assistant professor of psychology at Lewis University, which is just right outside Chicago. And I want to talk to you today about my study, which is called The Effects of University Communication on Student Resilience and Engagement during the COVID-19 pandemic. So definitely we have all around the world been affected by COVID-19, but there's definitely been some populations of individuals who have been more affected than others. And certainly the presenters before me offered us one great example of that, which is pregnant women. Another example though that I'm going to talk about is college-age students. This particular age group has been particularly affected by the pandemic. They've had an increase in mental and emotional challenges, and they've had their lives really completely disrupted. They've had to adapt to new ways of learning and just new ways of doing things, and have had a lot of their social interactions taken away from them during this time. So it has been really hard for them to be able to adapt. And so what this brings about is a need for higher education institutions to be able to find ways to be able to help their students and be able to retain them. And American universities have actually tried doing things like increasing communications. For instance, I know at Lewis University, our top leaders, such as the university president and the university provost, they have been attempting to increase communications, such as emailing regularly about the status of COVID-19 as it relates to the campus, updating everyone on guidelines and things of that nature. They've also been trying to go live on YouTube as often as they can to be able to allow opportunities for anyone on campus, such as students, faculty, or staff, to be able to ask them questions. So it was a way of offering two-way communication a little bit more. So we've seen a lot of that at other universities too. And so I started to wonder, is this really helping our students? And if so, in what ways? And really there was the impression that it was likely that these communications could be making a positive difference just based on organizational research, because it's been found that good internal communications are associated with positive organizational outcomes. Things like increasing employee support for change or increasing employee engagement. These things have been found to be related to good communication. So the purpose of this particular study was to examine whether university communications would be associated with student resilience and student engagement. So what I did was I actually had general psychology students at Lewis University participate in the study, and there ended up being about 148 participants. They're all of the traditional age students. They had to be at least 18 years of age, and they all primarily range in the age, they're primarily in the range of 18 to 22-year-olds, and they received received research credit for participating in this particular study. And they just completed an online survey which assessed demographic factors as well as the various study variables. And on the note of the study variables, one of the things that I assessed was the communication. And I had participants actually rate university communications on 3 separate factors that included thoroughness, helpfulness, and thoughtfulness. And participants would respond on a scale from 1 to 5. And these particular items that I used were actually adapted from a previous study that I conducted that was around organizational communication and change. And so I just adapted them to actually work within the university setting. And I actually found these items to actually have very good internal reliability. And just to sort of give you an example of what these items look like, an example of the items for thoroughness would be, did the university provide you with detailed information regarding new campus health and safety guidelines? An example of helpfulness would be, did formal communication from the university help you understand the new campus health and safety guidelines? And for thoughtfulness, did communications from the university make you feel cared about as a person? So just to kind of give you an idea of what I was looking at in terms of those different sub-factors. The other thing that I was examining was, of course, the resilience. And I used the state trait assessment of resilience scale that was created by Locke, Rees, and Heritage. And this particular scale actually assesses both state and trait resilience. And primarily I was interested in state resilience, but I included trait resilience as a control factor. And so in regards to the state resilience subscale, it included about 6 items, and the trait resilience subscale included about 7 items. And both of these different subscales actually had very good internal reliability. So that's how I assessed the state and trait resilience. And in terms of how I assess student engagement, I included 2 items that assess this particular factor. And these 2 items included, I am enthusiastic about attending the university. I am proud to be studying here. And these 2 items had good reliability, and also on this particular scale, participants actually indicated their level of agreement on a 1 to 7 scale. So that's how I assessed all of these different factors. And so in terms of the results, what I found is that state and trait resilience were highly correlated with each other, but they weren't really correlated with anything else. So as you can see in this table, there was really no connection between either state or trait resilience and communication. So I went to looking at student engagement. And in terms of student engagement, you can see that student engagement was positively and significantly correlated with the different factors related to university communication. So you can see that connection there. So from that point, after I realized that these factors were all positively correlated with communication, I decided to run a multiple regression analysis to actually examine which one of these factors actually was significantly predicting this student engagement factor. So I took a look at this through multiple regression and found that this is a significant regression, and also that thoughtfulness seemed to be the significant predictor of whether students are engaged or not. So it really seemed that thoughtfulness plays the key. So if the communications are thoughtful, then the student seems to have a positive effect on student engagement. So it was really interesting to kind of see how these results played out. So on that note, just kind of a summary of what was found, the university communication was not significantly associated with student resilience, but it was significantly associated with student engagement, and thoughtfulness of communications did seem to be that key predictor. So what are the limitations and where do we go from here? Well, of course, one of the biggest limitations of the study is that it is correlational. So there isn't any cause and effect relationship that we can determine here. The other issue is that this is a very limited sample, and we need additional research to really understand more about how communications would actually relate to student engagement. So that would definitely be great to kind of study this in other samples as well. And of course, because there was no connection between communications and student resilience, it would be important to understand and do further research in terms of what actually would make a difference in student resilience. And I've actually continued to study that in other studies that I have ongoing. And although there is limitations to the study, there are some practical implications we can pull from it. One is that universities should be very thoughtful in their communications. Their communications really should indicate that their care and concern for students, because that does seem to make a difference in how engaged with the university that the students do feel. And of course, we definitely want universities to be providing other sources of support that may in fact have an effect on student resilience. So for instance, having available counseling support for students would be one great way to make sure that students have the help they need and are able to stay resilient through these tough times. And these are my references here that I used, and I'm happy to entertain any questions or comments at this time.